You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Paul Brophy. Fortunately, my colleague Roisin Cleric won't be with us today, but we're going to keep the show going, and we're going to continue on the great work that she does here on the Irish Political Roundup with myself. I'm delighted to be joined by two men that are no strangers to this programme. Patrick O'Neill, former Fine Gael councillor here in Kilkenny, and also uh, a part-time beef farmer as well. Patrick, of course, was a Fine Gael councillor for over 10 years, and he was a Fine Gael general election candidate in 2020. And of course, Patrick Murphy is joining us from Brussels, where he is out doing many negotiations for our fishermen through his role as CEO of Ireland South and West Fisheries. In today's program, we're going to be looking at farming as a subject that we've covered here in great detail. But we're going to be looking at some of the challenges that may appear for our farmers right now, particularly around the whole nitrates um, derogation, which is going to have a big impact. So I'm delighted to be joined by the two lads here. I suppose Pat, so for the purposes of this interview, I'll call uh, we'll have Pat O'Neill and Patrick Murphy, or we'll go with that just so people are going to be confused. Um, Pat, nitrates derogation. It's a big subject for farmers. It was brought up a lot in the European election campaign. For our viewers and listeners out there who wouldn't be familiar with what this nitrates derogation is, in the simplest possible terms, how would you explain
Yeah, not the easiest one to explain, but
it?
basically, farmers in Ireland and with another couple of countries as well in Europe had special dispensation to produce us with more kilos of nitrogen per on the farm per livestock unit and per acre. So Ireland had a limit of 250 kilograms of nitrogen per acre, and the
Yeah,
basically we
you're right. Yes.
lost yeah, we lost that limit there recently, which reduced it to 2.2 kg. And there's talk of that being reduced again, possibly down to 170, which would have a hugely detrimental effect on particularly the dairy industry as a whole.
Yeah.
But basically, at the moment, it all comes down to water quality. And I suppose the EU's view on it was Ireland hasn't really hit their targets on improving water quality, and I suppose the
Mm.
nitrates derogation was part and parcel of that. Now, whether you agree with that or not, I suppose is debatable. But yeah, basically we lost that extra 30 kg that we had down to 220, and there's threats of it potentially in the next 5 years reducing back to 170. So
Yeah.
it's going to be basically you have a lot of I suppose member states who are not happy that Ireland has had that special dispensation on with others, and obviously don't support it. And look, it's a difficult one because farmers have been doing their bit to try and improve, and water quality has improved in some areas, not to the rate maybe that we like. But farming obviously isn't the only polluter when it comes to
I did don't relevant to this.
Yeah.
so it's been a challenge.
Yeah.
Is it the latest?
And as regards um
Is it?
your farmers, how does that impact them, particularly your dairy farmers,
Yeah,
as regards producing the milk that they want to produce?
basically any farmer that had that nitrates derogation and was reduced had two options: either reduce their stock numbers, reduce the cow numbers on the farm, or look for more land to spread the number of cows out across more acreage. So that's kind of led to most farmers, and particularly dairy farmers in recent times, would have expanded regards development, building, increased herd numbers, etc., on the back of good milk prices and government policy. So realistically, their first option wasn't going to be to destock because a lot of those farmers would probably be maybe of the younger generation.
Yeah.
So they've on the back of that, then obviously they went looking for more land. So land prices, rental prices have skyrocketed. So a lot of tillage men in particular have maybe found that very challenging because they can't compete with the land rental prices and I suppose purchase prices that dairy farmers were able to give after on the back of a couple of good years in milk. Obviously, a little bit different now, maybe in the next year or two as milk prices have come back a bit. But so it's leading to dairy farmers needing to take more land to keep what they have, to keep producing the milk that we have. It's leading to
Yeah.
tillage farmers, losing land, producing the feed that we need to feed the cattle, and
Yeah.
etc. So there's huge knock-on effects to the whole thing.
And it's a massive change in direction because 10 years ago, farmers were told get into dairy, and there was huge, supports to do that with the milk quotas going. And now I think you've said it before, with a stroke of a pen, the whole way of operating has had to change pretty much overnight.
Exactly. And, when you look at this, all comes down to, I suppose, climate change on the back of everything, and European policy as a whole, and Ireland being part of that. And yeah, like, I suppose everything is kind of looked at from just a blanket European view, but I suppose you don't get to look at Ireland as a whole and what Ireland is good at. And so agriculture is part and parcel of what Ireland is known for, as one of our indigenous industries. We're extremely good at what we do here. We produce food very sustainably and environmentally friendly way. But, we're hitting that sector quite hard at the moment, and it's a harder sector to reach the targets that they require as quick as they do, because you could make improvements now on your farm around water courses, etc., but that might take 5-10 years for those actual improvements to be seen. So it's a very difficult industry to see quick results, is what I would say. And that's going to be a huge challenge again over the next 5 to 10 years, is how farmers can, I suppose, control the narrative and keep, I suppose, everything bring a bit more sense to debate and policy, and everything goes along with it. Because look, the world is going to need Ireland to produce food over the next
Absolutely.
15, 20,
And
50 years.
that's something we'll touch on in a little bit. Patrick Murphy, you're out in Brussels, representing the Irish fishermen. Um, how were things going in Brussels? I suppose, yeah, your industry has huge challenges, as you've spoken on uh, this program before. Uh, do you see any changes happening in the near future, especially since the new EU Parliament came into force,
Yeah,
and the
well,
new.
we're hopeful. We're hopeful that the new commissioner who come in is different from the previous commissioner in his viewpoint. I'm hoping what Pat is saying there will be looked at in reality. And it's not that farmers don't want to change. As Pat said, it just takes time for change. And that's what Europe needs to understand. And we have measures in our own industry called fish improvement projects, and they're spaced out over 5 years. It's something like that it should be a farm improvement program, or water improvement program, that you do it step by step, and you're still allowed to keep going. And so instead of just getting a derogation and then taking that away, they should have changed it. But look, we're making these arguments for our industry. The farming lobby, I'm sure, will try and make the same ones. And we're not as lucky as the farmers in Ireland, because every MEP wanted to be on the European committees for agriculture, but none of them, and I mean none of them, put their names forward to be on the Fisheries committee. Like, we've a landlocked country in Europe that's actually got a representative on the PES committee. So that'll tell you what Europe sees then and what they understand. We have the richest fishing grounds in Europe, and we don't seem to have people understanding the value of it. And it's an indigenous industry, just like Pat said. That's where I think we're going to look, as a country, should be looking. We're a small nation, and our farming community, I said this during the election campaign, in the 1900s, at the start of the 1900s, 50% of our population were working in agriculture. When we joined the EU, that was 23%. In today's terms, now in 2024, it's 3%. So you're losing massive indigenous customs and people inside our industry. And as Pat said, you'll do without energy. You won't do without heat, and you won't do without food. They're the ones
Yeah,
that'll get you. So
yeah,
food
that's a very
security.
interesting statistic because by the time this program goes out, the national ploughing championships will have taken place, and hundreds of thousands of people will have flocked to Rahaneska in County Laois to the ploughing champ. to see the best of what rural Ireland agriculture has to offer. And if we're not careful, what we have could be lost.
Yeah, and that's a fact. Like so, and it's the same with the fishing industry. We have the richest fishing grounds. Every other country is trying to come into our waters to go fishing here. And but the thing is that what's affecting us now is starting to be a contagion right across Europe. So the policies that they brought in is not changing things for the better. It's actually making things worse for everybody, for all indicators in our industry. Like so, fish stocks are going down. The coastal communities are suffering. They're saying that our oceans are suffering. So the policy isn't working. It's under review now. And like you asked me what I'm in Brussels, I meet the commission now with the other people from all around Europe, right down to Italy. So we're all represented at these meetings now. It's the Market Advisory Council. So it's right across us, the processing sector as well too. And then we have the NGOs, the non-government organizations, Sienna, WWF, and they're at the meetings as well too. And we're all trying to find the solution to the problems that are there. Like we all have different viewpoints on it. The difference is that the people that lose out if we get it wrong are the fishermen and the people that are depending on getting healthy food onto the table, at a reasonable prices. Can't just keep importing stuff from all over the world and expect Europe to survive. We seem to be importing people rather than what we need to be importing into our country. So we had a voice, Paul. Yeah, we had a voice at the table here. Whether they listen to us or not, I don't know. All I know is that when I contribute, they take up the pen and they start writing. And for me, that's as much as we can hope for until we start see the results of that coming out. So we must be talking sense if they're listening and taking notes and on our proposals. And as I said to them, I said, look, it's in our interest to protect our oceans and keep it going because we're out of business if we don't. It's the same for the farming community. If they can't farm, they can't produce food, they go out of business as well too. And it's getting harder and harder.
Exactly. And Pat, your farming is pretty much in the beef sector. We'd import like large quantities of food from other countries, like the UK, for example. Beef imports for 2023 were 12,920 tons. Spain, 15,511. The Netherlands, 150. Denmark was 147. Germany was 100. And that's just beef. Like, surely logic and common sense say we produce some of the best food in the world. Surely some of this what we're producing should stay here. Um, and it would help local communities, rural areas, and people would get the best quality food as well.
There's many different reasons for probably those imports, and I'll try and give my best guess as to why these things are. And there's one part you just mentioned, Paul. Irish beef is of premium quality and is sought after all over the world. So, factories that produce our beef, not so maybe much the farmers are getting the premium, but the meat factories here are probably making a lot more money by exporting the Irish beef into as many countries as possible who will maybe pay a premium for the quality that it is. The other side of that is there's obviously trade deals between countries, and we could have signed up to deals as a country to take in certain amount of tons of beef from one country in order to receive other valuable commodities that we need that they produce, etc. as well. And all these things come into it as well. But look, there's plenty of Irish beef in the country that's being eaten. We know we produce, I think, is it 90% more beef than we need as a country or something along those lines. We export 90% of our beef. But there is huge challenges behind the scenes around and I'm not sure if it's been sorted in recent years, but it was an issue around labeling of Irish beef, and I think it was being looked at within Europe of the labeling laws, etc., because it was too easy for beef to come into this country and arrive into a factory, and just because it arrived into an Irish factory, it was slapped with an Irish beef logo, and that was never the case. So I'm not overly sure if that has improved. I would hope so, but look, I wouldn't have a huge issue with imports coming into the country as we're a trading nation. There is Irish beef in the country, and if these deals allow us to export more Irish beef to to other countries and to promote the brand, then excellent. But you would like to see the farmers maybe getting a better share of it, of course, and that's where it comes down to everything, because the
And is that
beef price in Ireland is always a small bit behind our neighbours in the UK and others that wouldn't look, they're producing good quality stuff, but the Irish stuff is always seems to be that little bit step ahead if you ask chefs and anyone else in that industry.
and for beef farmers to see a change, is it the producers? Sorry, not the producers, the factories. Is it they need to start paying a better price, or is it
I think
the
it's more so
supermarket?
I think a lot of it is, look, just a mix of both. I think a lot of it stems down to the supermarkets looking for as cheap a price as possible for their beef, and they have specific requirements for their customers. I was at a talk recently. It was quite interesting, a factory agent, and it kind of help you understand maybe some of the challenges that they face, because you always think that they're the bad guys to a certain extent. Now, look, they don't cover themselves in glory sometimes, but they have challenges from their customers and their requirements and what they want, and they're obviously trying to compete with other, I suppose, meat factories and pricing, etc. And I suppose, yeah, it's there's numerous different things, and like the supermarkets, consumers, the factories, like they all have a say in this, and it's a lot of it is packaging and sizes, cuts of steak, and they say they chase these smaller carcasses now because that's what people want, is a smaller cut. But when you talk to the factories, they hate these smaller carcasses because they actually can't make money off them because there's a lot of wastage with them and everything goes along with it. So that's a problem. So look, as a suckler farmer traditionally, obviously the quality carcass size, quality carcass conformation with the suckler breeds that are out there probably don't get the bonuses they deserve with the factories. They probably should start paying a premium for those types of animals if they want those types of animals, because we have a huge amount of dairy bred animals that are coming into the system now naturally as the increase in dairy herd, and that's leading to lower quality carcasses, lower carcass weights, etc., which the factories, to be honest, struggle with. And they say it openly themselves, but unless they're willing to pay a bit more of a premium for the bigger carcasses and the better conformation. Now, I know they do on the grid, but in my own opinion, it should be that little bit better, and it will maybe encourage more people to stay within the suckler industry as a whole, because the last 2 years have been really worrying. It has been trending downwards for a long time, but there's been a rapid decline in the last 2 years regarding suckler cow numbers in particular, and you're losing huge quality out of the system every year, with lads either renting their land out now to either dairymen or tillagemen or whoever they want to rent it to, or they're just getting out of them altogether, maybe buying in dairy calves, a handier number, getting older, retiring. A lot of the younger farmers went into dairy when times were good, and so there's a huge issue in that side generationally, in the beef side of things, in all parts of farming, but probably more so the beef side of things.
Yeah, and Patrick Murphy, I know you're coming from a fishing industry, but I'm sure you can totally understand the frustrations that beef farmers have faced, because you see it firsthand within your own industry.
Yeah, but we have a small farm as well too. My father was
Yeah, absolutely.
was as Pat was talking about. He had dry cattle, so he was rearing for the meat industry. But I don't have good news on that front, because the Mercure deal is back on the table now again. And we raised this during the campaign that Brazil were resisting any embargo on their production if it came from an area that was deemed as reclaimed green forest. And they said that so they're after pointing out the fact now that Ireland itself has over 1 million acres that are designated as reclaimed bogland. So this is the threats that are coming from the new regulations and legislation and trade deals. And I think Pat is right. We have to export good quality meat. But if we don't have it, we're going to fall into the same category of what we're importing,
Yeah, exactly, and that is huge, because food security and good quality food is really important, and
we keep hearing about the subsidies and the help that farmers get, but they do that because the price of meat and has gone nowhere near the same equivalent of the costs that have increased. So they have to be subsidized. And we're the same now in the fishing industry. So sorry, the lads are calling me there. So just you do know that in our country that they brought in the government help for the artists of Ireland, and 9,000 people applied for this help. They registered 2,000, and each one of those artists, to subsidise their income, gets €325 a week. So if you're looking at what I think we should be looking at, is because there's such a decline in numbers, and as Pat said, we're losing the skill set, we're losing the knowledge because people are getting out, then maybe it's looking at beyond just producing food, but as Pat said, a reward for the top quality food that gives us that reputation all over the world, that allows us to produce 100% and export 90%. And as we all know, like 70,000, I think, is what tons we brought in from Poland. Anybody can go into the shops and they can see the difference in the steaks and the different, premium brand and deluxe beef. And then you have the cheaper cuts, and the cheaper cuts is obviously the stuff coming in from outside the country. And look, you have to, as Pat says, the factories and the food distribution chains, the supermarkets, they have to make a profit and stay in business as well too. So it's a complex industry, but government are there to govern, and it's up to them to sign. Yeah. So sorry, the lads are they're going down now, so hopefully they'll give me a shout and I won't miss my flight. But no, but this is down to governance. This is down to the future, and the future is if you don't have young people or people inside the industry, like I said, just think 50% in agriculture, that's down now to 3%. And I know a lot has been leaving the industry because of modernization as well too. It's labor intensive, with the machinery and the equipment is way better, and IT and all the technologies that are there make it a lot easier, and transport is easier. So where you would have wanted extra help now, that's no longer there. Or you could have a fella on a quad bike can round up cattle rather than 4 or 5 fellas trying to drive them up. All these things have changed. I understand that. But now we're at a stage where to plan for the future, you're going to have to decide, do you want to keep an indigenous industry alive? And is it paying to keep it alive? And I think that conversation needs to happen sooner rather than later. And everything can be solved. This derogation, it isn't that many farmers in the country that are going to be affected by that, so they can be helped. But Pat's right when you hear what he says, that people are getting out. There's not enough money in it. It costs too much. They'll get more money by leasing it out and going and get another job. That's life. But there's a cost to that. And that's the cost we have to evaluate, the capital cost.
Absolutely. And Pat, your former colleague in Fine Gael and former EU Commissioner Phil Hogan, he was speaking at a conference there recently, and he made a very good quote. There's a very good quote from him. Farmers must be given confidence in the future of their business. One way of achieving this will be to put agricultural co-ops at the heart of these development processes. So, what would you think of that? Do you think that could be a way that could assist farmers? So, just for our listeners out there, could you just explain briefly what a co-op is?
I suppose traditionally, farmers in certain areas would have came together and produced food together in their own local co-op. Milk would have been brought there, butter would have been produced there. Everything like this, going back to the 50s and 60s, they were hugely successful. And I suppose in time, as farming became very successful, these started to merge and become bigger entities and became public, and lost the kind of, maybe all the farmers still had shares in them, but they became completely different to maybe what they were originally as they grew. But farmers probably need to, and it's always been discussed and talked about, setting up their own kind of co-op systems again to protect themselves, to do things their own way as they see fit, and be in control of their own destiny to a certain extent. Because the problem is now lack of competition from a milk collection perspective, from a meat processing perspective, is a huge problem, because there's 3 or 4 large entities in each of those areas that kind of control certain areas of the country themselves, and you're relying on those to give you what they will give you, and you don't really have anywhere to turn to get a second quote or compete, because someone from, a quote from Kerry is not going to come up here to collect milk from someone in Kilkenny. It's not logistically or feasible. So the guys in this part of the world are reliant on Glanbia and their milk price, and same down in Munster with Kerrygold, etc. So, back in the day, they were more localized. People had a bit more, farmers had more input and more control as the direction of them. And it wouldn't be a bad thing again. And always been talked about loosely in passing as well is environmental stuff, like, even community energy projects, whether it be solar or wind, that farmers could, anaerobic digestion is a big thing farmers could work with, power even their own villages, let's say, with the
absolutely.
with the waste that they produce on the farm. All this is doable and it's done across Europe, but something we're kind of, I suppose, more so farmers are talking about, and there's plenty of technology there, but I suppose government wise, legislation wise, we're way off the mark, and we're not within 10 years of probably being able to do it. But farmers are an extremely hardy group of people, and they're very clever, and they're very good at business, and like they know, they will see, if they were given the chance of, to go after an opportunity, they would take it and they would do it extremely well. And they always have done it that way. But at the moment, they're completely hamstrung with everything that goes along. There's nowhere they can turn to try and help themselves improve, because everything is red tape at the moment. And through the Department of Agriculture, through my own experiences in the last couple of weeks and months with grants and young farmer stuff, and like, it's absolutely painful, some of the stuff. Like, no wonder they're not getting to anything, because it's absolutely insane, some of the stuff that they can't figure out themselves with some documents you give them, getting request after request back to explain why that account number is on that farm and why it's not on that farm and why is that there. Like, it's absolutely crazy stuff. Crazy. It's like, where are they finding these people who are reviewing these documents? Like, why is it so difficult? Like, I can make sense of it myself. Why can't you guys? And this is what's happening for the sake of
and
a
that
few.
was one thing that was brought up as well during the European elections, the red tape that farmers and fishermen, Patrick, you're probably one of the most overly regulated industries in the world.
Yeah, but they're catching up now on all the other industries, Paul. Like what we heard today now, was down to fish boxes and packaging, and everything wants to be monitored and labeled and traced. And if it's plastic, you have to have a plan for it. And, when we actually look into the modernization of packaging and everything else, it's there for a reason and it's cheap. But to use resources to wash that and clean it with chemicals, you're creating another environmental problem for the sake of trying to polish that up. And this is what's happening. And there doesn't seem to be any joined up thinking from one group to another. Somebody comes up with an idea and they say, let's do that, and nobody else is calling a halt. This is what's happening. Over-regulation. There are more people now inside in offices telling people like Pat and people that are working just like he said than there is in the farm. That's the problem. There's more money now going into the regulation rather than into the food production.
Yeah, it's crazy, and as I said, it was one of the things that was brought up during the European elections about red tape and trying to streamline it and stuff like that. But that seems a long way off.
Yeah,
it's never going to happen. It's not going to change. Like, and unfortunately, like, I can't see a change. It's just, if they brought, like, I don't mind doing paperwork and providing them with information and detail, but I like them to be able to read the bloody stuff properly as what you give them, because you give them the information and they come back with like the most ridiculous question it could be, and then everything's delayed. You could be waiting for a couple of thousand of a payment from the department, and it's delayed and delayed and delayed because of they can't literally read simple information that you provide them. And it's something Patrick mentioned earlier, I suppose, around subsidies and everything like that. And the ideas of them in the early 2000s were great. And look, some farmers did quite well out of them for a long time, but that's changed. Like, the subsidies have been eaten away by inflation, by reduction in subsidies, because they started just removing budget and putting into other areas. Like, our subsidy is probably down, I'd say, close to 50% now from what it was 20 years ago, which is huge money. Consider then the cost of business has increased significantly as well as that. And they come out with a few little small bits and pieces here and there, but all those schemes do is add insane amount of extra work, paperwork, regulation, inspection. Like, it's just very difficult to understand it all. And farmers would love to be able to earn money off land at their own they don't want to be getting subsidies, but that's never going to be reality when it comes to a consumer perspective. But if they're going to be paying subsidies, they have to pay them right. And something Patrick said was interesting on the artist grant. I suppose farmers never really now, maybe there is something to be said for particularly maybe beef farmers and tillage farmers to a certain extent. Dairymen obviously have a monthly milk check that they can live off, and it's a bit easier. But these like some beef farmers may not sell cattle for 3, 4, 5 months of no income, and like they could when they get that check, if the feed price is raised in that time, if God knows what fuel prices, everything like that, no profit, no money into debt, and literally have nothing to survive on. So maybe there is something to be said for a weekly payment to the likes of beef and tillage farmers, just a living subsidy, so that in bad times that they're not going to be literally put to the wall. But I know farmers wouldn't maybe like to hear that. But maybe it's something that should be potentially thought about down the line, because that is a big challenge in beef farming, and why people want to get out of it is because the lack of regular income, in particular, fluctuation in price, in particular, you're reliant on, cost inflation. It just affects that industry a lot more. And tillage men are the same. If you have a bad tillage year on price, you sow your crops, you spray your crops, you look after your crops, and then if the grain price is down, and it could be down astronomically, you're absolutely wiped, and you're relying on the banks and everything else, and the pressure that comes with that, and yeah, not simple, So,
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'd
And
make this point,
right,
Ed. It's as simple as this. When a farmer makes money and does well, he pays higher taxes, and so does everybody else in the production. But they never get that back. So the bad years eats up, the good years, because it's gone. So that's the forward thinking that has to happen. Whether what they're doing in Australia, which is banking massive profits or profits from one year, so that if it next year is poor, then the government writes off that tax. It's not costing them anything, and it's there. And if you have a second good year, then you can give the previous good year into the system, and then you carry forward the next year. It's just another security that. But first of all, we have to have a recognition of the indigenous people that work so hard in our industry and get up, and that no matter of hours is calculated for them. Every other sector has working hours and 39 hours a week. That doesn't happen with the industries I'm talking about, only the people that are employed. If we don't start looking at things and changing things, other countries like the Brazilians and everywhere else, there's a way cheaper running cost. They don't have anything like the regulations that we have a way easier way of producing and at low cost per unit. And of course, they're going to flood that into the country because Europe will be looking for cheap food. But if you keep draining the well, then you're going to end up with dust at the bottom of it, and that's the problem. And we're a small country. We're excluded from Europe, and I mean by excluded means is that we're cut off by land, sea, and air after Brexit. Brexit is in between, so we have huge challenges to get to the marketplace and everything else. And we're going to have to be looked after. But the only way we're going to be looked after, in my view, is get a recognition of who we are and what we've done and what we should be protected going forward for our kids. And I'm not talking about massive amounts of the population. As I said, it's 3% for the farmers. And at the moment, that's it, of the workforce now, not of the population. And that's probably subsidized by maybe half of that is working in other jobs. In farming, I dread to think what it is. It's probably a percent of a percent, a fraction of a percent. So we're not talking about a lot of people here, but we are talking about something very, very interesting. And you said that yourself, Paul, hundreds of thousands going to the ploughing match. So hundreds of thousands believe that farming should be there. They want to see it. They have connections with it. They might be doing it themselves, but they want to see what farming is about, see the ploughing, and they want to go out for the day out, see the animals. They bring them out from the cities and everything else. And as you said, sure, that could disappear very, very quickly. And I mean that, like, very, very quickly, just like the fishing industry. Lads, I better go because I'm looking at the watch now, and I'd be
no
afraid to
problem.
miss a flight, and
Thanks,
I don't want to be
thanks,
getting into a
Patrick. We
hotel.
appreciate you taking the time to chat to us as always.
Oh, anytime. Yeah, yeah.
All the best, Patrick.
Always enjoy your
Take care,
contribution.
Pat.
Thanks very much.
Take care,
Take
lad.
care.
Thanks, bye. Bye, bye, bye.
See you soon. And I suppose, and that I suppose the last question. Of course, you're coming from a Fine Gael background. Um, budgets coming up. When you spoke about beef, with the difficulties that beef farmers have, and is there anything you'd like to see specifically come up in the budget that could would help beef farmers.
Where do you start?
Yeah,
Look, a lot of it, I suppose, doesn't really come down to budgetary stuff. I suppose the stuff that would help farmers a lot and young farmers a lot are a lot of these capital gains taxes, inheritance taxes, all these kind of things are big lump sum taxes that hit young farmers starting off when maybe they would could spend that money maybe investing in
yeah,
stuff that would
absolutely.
improve climate change on their farm or improve stuff. Like they're huge blockers in my mind to young farmers taking over and older farmers also signing things over as well. Now there is a certain tax not loophole is not the right word. What's the word term I'm looking for? Tax credits maybe and other things in these scenarios. That look, farmers do have a good deal in some of these things up to a certain value, etc. But like I think it could be better, and that would help younger farmers starting off and succession a bit, make it a bit easier and cleaner, and help these things. As Patrick actually made a good point there, like potential tax reforms is when farmers have to pay their tax bills. Like this scenario where you have volatility and everything goes along with it. That really good years are quite rare, and when you do have really
Yeah,
good, there's a big tax bill, and potentially can that be spread out or held over a couple of years. Not a bad call because
yeah,
it's better to keep it there in reserve for a bad year to help the farm survive and then let the whole thing fall apart and farmers have to lend and to spend money in that regard and interest and everything goes along with it. Like that's quite an interesting point. Like budgetary wise, like on the front of it, there isn't a huge amount. Like you would just like to see, I suppose, government take on, I suppose, the some of the monopoly that goes on around beef prices, everything that goes along with it. Like look for a fair deal for the farmer because the farmer, no doubt, is coming out of it the worst of the tree. Like being the meat factories and the supermarkets themselves, like the farmer is definitely the worst off of them all. With the supermarket probably making the most, and the meat factory somewhere in the middle. And completely understand these factories and supermarkets have to make their money, and there's no doubt about it. But they seem to be making that bit more off the farmers than maybe is fair. And
absolutely. Because
also from a government perspective, I think are more like budgetary wise, your fuel allowance and all these kind of kite flies you get, are not really that relevant to farmers in particular. But
yeah, exactly. Well, Pat, thanks a million for taking the time to talk to us here on the Irish Political Roundup. It was very, very uh, interesting getting your thoughts on all things farming, and particularly beef farming. And that's probably something we should get you on to talk about a bit more because it's an industry that we sort of both Roisin and myself probably we'd be really interested in finding out more because we all know about, as you said, the dairy farmer. There's always, milk is always being produced, and there's always um, uh, a check coming in, but as you said, with the beef farmer, he mightn't um sell beef for months on end, and that can have a huge impact. So I suppose that's the biggest takeaway for me from this
yeah,
program. Something I would have never ever thought about. So
yeah. Look, I
thanks
suppose that
thanks for opening up my eyes and hopefully our viewers
yeah,
as well.
no problem. I suppose look, every farmer has to have their you'd obviously like to try and split cattle sales as best as possible over a year for a cash flow perspective. But generally, if you have cattle that are all around the one age and that's the way your system is, you might sell all your cattle within a 1 month period, and that's your at the rest of the year. Your only other income is probably your subsidies when they come. So let's say, for example, like I bought 70 dairy calves there last year. So they'll be probably you normally selling them maybe if you're going to slaughter them between 2 years, between maybe let's say February, March, April. But let's say March and April, over 2 month period, you could sell all those 70 animals. I might not have another animal sold until the following March or April. So you're relying then on your subsidies coming in November, let's say, or October, November time. So like it's managing cash on a farm is difficult in beef farm in particular. But look, to be honest, I've tried to split it up as best as possible. I'll probably carry over some of it older, etc. Yourself, you just have to try and have money coming because the bills come all the time. They don't come in phases; they come all the time.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you have
unfortunately,
to
that's very
you
true.
have to stay on top of those. But look, yeah, it's a challenge, and farmers and for the most part are good accountants as well at the end of the day. But
Or
it's
are they?
yeah, it's
They are
it
the
can be very,
custodians
very
of our
challenging.
land, and they're very good business people. Well, Pat, thanks a million for taking the time to talk to us here
No
on the
problem,
Irish
Paul.
Political.
Happy to do it as always.
Thank you.
Thanks a million.